The Health and Wealth Radio Network.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening, and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. My name is Dr. Richard Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And super awesome dude, an all-around good egg.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I can say the same for you. I could say we're both sort of a year older than when we were here last week.
My 1 year older, much, much older brother. There's a third one even older.
That's right.
Past 60.
He is.
Oh, my God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But as always, it's a pleasure to be with you.
For me as well.
Thank you to our listeners. If you're joining us on the radio in South Florida, we're on 95.3 FM. And 1470 AM on WNN. Mm-hmm. And if you're watching us live streaming on Facebook, hello.
Hey, glad to see you.
Thank you for joining us.
Glad you're joining us.
And we thank you for any likes and shares you're feeling generous with throwing our way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if anybody wants to...
sponsored.
And if anybody wants to join the conversation, ask questions or throw in some comments or just sort of, I don't know, tell us the weather. You can join us live at 888-565-1470.
1470.
Is that
you
correct?
Still haven't got this radio thing down? That's right.
That's right.
888-565-1470
on your
1470.
Well, on your phone, dial.
Sure. And you can join us, join the conversation.
Absolutely. And again, you can also submit via Facebook. So, other than birthdays and all kinds of chaos and drama for the week.
The usual.
Yeah, what's going on with you, my brother?
Well, just the usual hectic week, preparing for our cross-country adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Moving lovely daughter to Portland.
Yeah.
From one corner of the country to the other.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why anybody wants to live in places like that, where it's so cold.
Well, because it's not Florida.
And rain. I guess that's it.
You know, again, as much as I don't want her to go, I want her to go.
Yeah.
She needs to go.
She's ready to fly the nest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how long have I been saying I came to Florida for 3 months? And
well, for 30 years.
30 years now. Still haven't left. Still riding.
That's right.
Still extending that 3 months.
That's right.
Stay.
Came down for 3 months 30 years ago.
It's worked out pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and, you know, also with a lot of the professional stuff, Modern Sex Therapy Institutes, both for professional training. Again, want to make sure that people know, especially other therapists and medical professionals.
Thank you for remembering.
To basically, this is the place to get your training. In the state of Florida, all therapists, right? People often don't realize that Florida is the only state in the country that requires a specific certification to do sex therapy.
Yes,
and therapists need to
exciting as that is, you know, it's about regulating the term certified sex therapist. That no one can claim that title without being able to document that they've had the education, which, as fate would have it, is the education and then some that Modern Sex Therapy offers. We offer not just the requirements for Florida certification, but a much more stringent, longer-term certification from a national organization known as ASECT, which we are providers for.
Right. And ASECT, for those of you who don't know, is the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists.
That, right, in the absence of any other standard in the other 49 states, basically you're a sex therapist when you say you are.
Right.
And even in Florida, you don't have to call yourself a certified sex therapist. Anyone can hang a shingle and call themselves a sex therapist. And basically, you know, well, you can't use the word therapist unless you're licensed.
Right, you have to be licensed.
But if you're licensed, you don't have to be trained to call yourself. In fact, one of the most common marketing tools just about every therapist uses is Psychology Today, because they have the best search engine optimization. And if people anywhere in the country just type in sex therapist in their area, the first thing that's going to come up is their Psychology Today listing for local clinicians. And that's just a box you can check when you're completing your profile.
Okay.
So whether or not you have any training at all, you could check, yeah, I do sex therapy. Why not?
Okay, so for those therapists who just want to call themselves sex therapists, go ahead and do it. But for those therapists who actually have integrity, then give it a call. And it's not only for professionals and offering professional training that we do all over as well, but if people want to get a hold of you to do some psychotherapy, some couples work, one-on-one work.
Excellent. Yes, I'm really honored lately to have joined the group practice of the lovely and brilliant Luna Medina Wolf at Helping Moon Counseling. So I'm now in West Boca by Glades and the Turnpike, and can be reached by shooting an email to ricky@modernsextherapy.com. And again, our professionals, both medical and mental health providers with any interest, can check out Modern Sex Therapy Institutes, plural, modernsextherapyinstitutes.com. We have some really exciting workshops coming up. We just had the thrill of talking with our guest from a week or so ago.
Yeah.
Marty Klein did a brilliant lecture last Sunday on working with couples when porn is the issue. Always, I can't count the number of times I've heard him speak, and it just keeps getting better.
Yeah, it's one of those few people that we can truly sit at their feet. And, again, no matter how many times we hear them, we're always learning. There's always something new. There's always another angle.
Yeah. Stan Althoff is another one, and he taught for us on Friday. Yeah, we're very fortunate. My also brilliant and beautiful and talented business partner in Modern Sex Therapy Institutes, Dr. Rachel Needle, will finally, I think, make it onto the show in a couple of weeks. Been trying all this time to get her on here. And we're very fortunate that we are able to have some of the truly best and brightest teach our institute students. Some of the real big names in the field, some authors, some researchers, some renowned sex therapists, folks who trained us and the folks who trained them. And I really can't complain about work. Being able to see patients and help them through sexual concerns and couples and save marriages and keep lovers. But even more exciting, and I know this was part of your passion, is the trainer. The helpers usually need more help than the patients they're helping. Yeah. So they have the ability to train therapists and to train medical professionals. To even, you'd think it's the most basic thing of all, to just ask the question, right? Make it, break that ice so that the patient is not embarrassed or fearing embarrassing the professional by asking a sexual subject.
Well, we both know that there is a reality here, and that is so many professionals are the ones that are the most uncomfortable.
That's
How
why the
many
question doesn't get
professionals
asked.
do not bring up that question because A, they're uncomfortable, and they often hide that discomfort. And I'm going to call out marriage and family therapists on this one.
Yeah, we always do. I stop
exactly.
now.
So this idea of, no, you have to wait until you build trust, until you have a relationship. No, that's what they're there
we'll work
for.
on your communication first.
Well, that's another thing,
before
too. But
we
even
can
just the
address your
avoidance
sexual
thing
problem.
that they couch as a good strategy.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. That's what they're there for. We want to bring them out there right up front. Let's be clear. Why are we here? What are we here to talk about? We can build up to things from there, but we cannot be afraid and we can't avoid and just wait for the right moment before we broach the core of what they're there for.
Or wait until we have a strong enough rapport.
Well, that's the thing.
Or
exactly.
therapeutic
Oh, no, wait. We
alliance.
have to create that.
It's like the drum roll starts, 4th session, 5th session. So, how's the old sex life?
Well, but
please
even
say fine. Please
but they
say
never
fine.
even get at it. A lot of times never even get around to that. How many
Quick
times
ask.
have we, and you in particular, even in the last couple of years, I know, have had people coming to you that have been seeing
All
other
the time.
therapists for years,
and
they have these couples that are there for sexual problems, and one of the things they're coming to you for is because we've been working with this other therapist for 3 years now, and they haven't brought up sex once.
Any sex therapist will tell you that they get patients from other therapists who either refused or were unable to talk about sex. And
Right.
you know, my favorite line, my favorite guilt-inducing marketing line, right? Couples counselors that don't talk about sex are like plumbers that don't do toilets.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody would tolerate that.
Right.
Nobody in their right mind would let the plumber into their house, especially if their toilet was backing up, you know, or that stuff coming the wrong
Right.
way. It's supposed to go out of our house and away, not back up into our house. That's a panic situation. And imagine a plumber coming in saying, "Oh no, sorry, I don't do toilets,"
Right.
because
Right.
it's too embarrassing. I went to a very conservative plumbing school, and we only did sinks and showers.
Right, exactly.
No, you would expect them to get the hell out of the plumbing profession,
Right.
and go someplace where you know they're not afraid to do the whole job. And
Right.
you know, there's a lot of awesome, wonderful, brilliant marriage and family therapists who understand it's right there in their name. Why do people get married, and how do they have families? And very
Right.
often, those are the problems that bring them into therapy. And like, I'm so glad Tammy Nelson says this all the time to every therapist. I don't care. It doesn't matter if you're not a sex therapist. You ask the question in the first session. You have a couple come to you, you ask.
Well, if they're a
about-
couple, that has to be germane. That has to be part of the issue.
Even if they say, let them say no, right?
Right.
Are there any sexual concerns that you would like to discuss? No, we're great there. I mean, that's common, right? Couples that are so contentious and on the verge of divorce, they say, oh, well, at least we're still having great sex. That's the only thing keeping us together. Usually it's the opposite. The sex life dies first, and all the other resentments breed and grow. And
Well, and it becomes, you know, the whole percentage and the whole perception of the role sex plays in a relationship changes with the quality of the relationship. Again, we know, and there's been, you know, it's been put out there quite a bit that if things are going really well in the relationship, things are smooth, they're getting along, everything is good, then you ask the couple, how much of this relationship does sex represent? They'll say something like 25%. Right? 25% of the relationship. But when things are going bad and they're rough and they're chaotic,
That
you ask
grows.
them, well, how much is sex part of the relationship?
huge.
Now it's like 75%.
that's huge.
Yeah. So it really often is, I think sex is often the bellwether for what's going on in that relationship, either positive or negative.
Well, yeah, I was going to say sex is the victim often of a lousy
It's often the you know, I often
issues.
describe that as right. It's the casualty. We
Yes.
have sexual problems, but we have more of sexualized problems.
That's the word,
where the
yes.
sex becomes the casualty of all the other stuff going on in the relationship.
Yeah.
Which is why that idea of fix the communication, the sex fixes itself, is just wrong.
It's really, it's naive nonsense. And even a lot of people, the old MFTs who said that, even they know it's not true. But, you know, it buys
the conditioning.
time.
Right. Yeah, there you go. It buys time.
It buys time.
You know? So, you know, we see, and this is, you know, a lot of the work that we do, and I've always loved the fact that, you know, my connection to sex therapy and sexuality education, you know, it's that we have the opportunity to help people with that, the most core aspect of who they are. We're talking about what really kind of lies at the foundation of the greatest joy that a human being can experience.
Certainly,
the source of
certainly some of the best perks.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the levels of ecstasy, and I mean, it is just the most brightly shining light that is a part of the human existence.
And yet,
But,
we can't talk about it.
well,
It's
not
too
only can't we talk about it,
taboo,
well,
we get
again,
swirly, we get uncomfortable.
where does all that come from?
We're
Because
embarrassed.
as bright as that light shines, there is a darkness
Right.
that it inhabits in some people. It's not the sex that's dark, but there's darkness that inhabits their sexual part, the sexual part of their lives, in a lot of people. We talk about sexual abuse. We talk about sexual problems, sexual confusion.
Right.
You know, when you look at the way some of these kids are brought up in some of these ultra-conservative, ultra, almost off-the-charts religiosity kind of levels,
Right.
it is tantamount to terrorism.
Certainly, yeah. Let's talk about that now, right? Because so many people, of course, part of what contributes to so many couples' relationship and sexual problems is that people bring their baggage into their current relationships. And if that baggage includes that kind of developmental path where people have sexual trauma or have been abused as children.
Right. Often that's where the script gets established.
Or even, any time prior to that current relationship, that gets brought into the dynamic of the relationship and leads to kind of sexual problems. How often do we talk about symbolic meaning?
Right.
And if one partner in a couple has a history of abuse, and that means that their values interpret something like porn to represent that abuse. So they refuse, they say, I can't be in a relationship with someone who looks at porn because it makes me feel unsafe. So it's the same thing for 30 years we've been talking about with sex ed. When parents say, I'm uncomfortable, so you can't do it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Then that's not going to work in a relationship.
Well, no, it doesn't stop people from trying, but no, it doesn't work.
Too often therapists who avoid talking about sex fall into these same traps of discomfort and avoidance. So the problems just continue to get perpetuated. Even worse when it's just blatant countertransference or malpractice, when therapists buy into these scripts like, if a couple's married 10 years and they haven't had sex in the past 7, and then there's the big bust, oh my God, he's looking at porn. That's the reason. It's easier for the therapist to just kind of buy right into that.
Sure.
Right? Instead of saying, well, let's back up a little bit.
Right.
Let's talk about why this relationship has become a sexual desert, and you guys have become barely tolerant roommates or like siblings.
Right.
Right.
Well, but again, you also have to have somebody
too much
that,
work. It's easier to blame porn.
That's the thing, but it's also a default status for so many people, especially therapists. I'm going to make a sort of a similar kind of area that we deal with all the time. That the reaction, that sort of default reaction to things, just like if we're talking to a guy, I mean, how many therapists, sex therapists, other therapists, even doctors, here's a guy, he's 58 years old, and he's been having problems getting erections. They say, oh, okay, well, what are some of the things going on? You take blood pressure medication? There you go.
All right.
It's like a ready-made answer. Right,
Yeah.
antidepressant. That's why.
Or send him get his testosterone checked.
I mean, it's these kind of default rhetorical things that people call it, and the same thing with porn. Oh, porn, you poor thing.
Yeah.
You victim, the victim perpetrator. We talked about this before on the show. This automatic victim perpetrator narrative, but so many therapists automatically, and this is the countertransference. I want to explain that concept for people that don't know what that is. That the countertransference from that therapist connects them with the victim.
Right. Always.
And then legitimizes the victim,
same thing with
not
affairs,
anybody else.
Right?
Same thing
Remember,
with affairs.
the people who have the affairs are denied any story. They're not allowed. They're not allowed because they transgressed. And the therapist immediately goes and aligns with the cheated on and vilifies the cheater.
Right.
And the whole therapy is about what does the cheater have to do to make up for and atone and show remorse and beg back
that doghouse
the
dynamic.
trust of the cheated on.
Right.
Right. And again, the therapist, like so many of these so-called sex addiction therapists, will take that current crisis the couple's in and freeze it. Now that's the new permanent for the rest of their relationship.
Exactly.
If they stay together. They're certainly not going to be lovers ever again unless there's some intervening message about
Well, if they can break
dealing
through
with
this dynamic and
crisis
create
as
a new
adults and continue the story with a new understanding, with some new definitions, with some new agreed values about sex and sexuality.
Right.
How could someone, first of all, I know we've got to get back to the subject I want to talk about, but how can someone, say to a partner, you may not masturbate because I'm uncomfortable with it, and in a lover's dynamic, right? And then B, imagine a guy coming home from work every day and having to confess to his wife with his head hung down and his tail between his legs, yes, dear, I masturbated at work today. I lost control. And, who would even want to go home right?
Well,
How
I
is
mean, you're going
that-
home to mommy.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
know, that's what you. That's what's
what
that. You're going home
destroys
to
these
mommy.
dynamics.
And how can you eroticize a mother-son scolding relationship? Yeah, it can't.
No.
It can't work.
No. But as we started and veered off in typical fashion, very often a lot of what triggers these kinds of reactions is, unfortunately, and again, most therapists, I can't imagine any therapist never hearing about child sexual abuse in some of the patients they work with. Because one of the leading causes of the mental illnesses that bring people to therapy, depression and anxiety disorders, especially when it comes to sexuality, often started there, right? It's kind of, I've often conceptualized sexual assault as like a theft, especially from a young person, especially a young woman who's generally not a young girl, who's not empowered or considered autonomous. It's like stealing her sexuality from her.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's stealing the real script potential. It's stealing the story that has yet to be told and imposing a completely different one on there as well. And this is nothing new. You know, one of the things that really was one of the biggest surprises to Freud, to Sigmund Freud, was that virtually every woman that he talked to kind of expressed some experience with child sexual abuse. And, you know, that became a lot of the basis for much of his thinking and techniques and concepts that he developed. I mean, it's pervasive. In some cultures, it's a given. We know statistically, and again, statistically, which means if we're using the statistic, if this is what we know statistically, it's underreported. That one in, I mean, anywhere between 4 and 5, it changes over the years. 1 in 4 women in the United States has been or will be experiencing some type of sexual trauma or abuse before the age of 18.
And
actually, it's more like 1 in 3. It's more like 1 in 5 men.
Right. I've heard those kind of numbers. Yeah.
So, I mean, again, if we're looking at those numbers, that's only what they're counting. They're only counting what people are saying.
Course. We know
more
these
people are not saying
some of the most
than saying.
underreported crimes of them all.
Right.
Especially when, you know, as James Cantor was saying when he was on a couple of weeks ago, the vast majority of so-called child molestation, the vast majority is not done by predatory pedophiles. It's drunken uncles or, you know, incestuous kind of activity, right? So when James Cantor was on with us, I wanted to bring him on to talk about that thing was in the news. This was back in January. Our regular listeners may remember we were discussing with James Cantor, this expert from Canada, about that piece in the news of a seizure of shipments of these child dolls at the Canadian border. Now, I had not heard about anything happening here at home. I can only imagine it was in response to that same incident at the Canadian border. But a Florida politician, a representative from down in Broward County, has a bill moving up. I understand it's been through committee twice and will surely be a breeze to be passed, banning these child sex dolls.
Right.
And I wanted to give a shout out. I had the pleasure of being interviewed by Dr. Jeremy Malcolm from an organization called Prostasia. You can find them at Prostasia, Prostasia, prostasia.org. And he asked, we talked about a couple of important questions that the interview is going to be available in their newsletter. You could go to that website, prostasia.org. But just the first question I want to kick around with you. He asked whether or not I felt like bills such as this, banning these child dolls, will protect children, will prevent child sexual abuse.
Well, the first word that comes to my mind is no.
No, right? Because the same old argument, right? It goes back to the same hysteria if I may use that word, about porn.
Right.
That porn becomes addictive, and if it's encouraged, it gets worse and worse, and the user gets tolerant and needs bigger doses of weirder, stranger
Right.
porn.
It's so bizarre.
And then when that doesn't work anymore, they're out the door.
But then they have to get into real people.
As predators.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if...
again, which is just wrong.
on so many levels, right? There's just no proof of it. In fact, as Marty Klein
Actually, the opposite is
as
proof
Marty
of.
was pointing out, over this 20-year history of access to 24/7 high-quality streaming porn, the Earth is not in chaos. Planes are not falling out of the sky. People aren't running in the streets on fire. As a matter of fact, divorce rates have gone down. This goes back, I don't know to cite any research, but as long as we've been in this field, we've heard about how in places where there's more access to adult entertainment and sex
That's right.
toys and pornography, there's always less
Right.
sexual assaults.
Absolutely. Sex
and
crimes
less-
are down in those areas where it's accessible.
Right, and as long as I can remember, the message has always been the same, that
Right.
the more you try and restrict and clamp down, you see an increase in sexual assault.
On so many levels. Again, completely different area, but it's the same kind of reason why abstinence only actually contributes to teen pregnancy. Doesn't
Right.
prevent it.
Of course,
It contributes to.
right.
So,
Remember-
again, the more you try to squeeze something, the more you're forcing it out.
yeah.
And it's really what they're doing. So, if these things with eliminating these, I mean, we can have a conversation, and I think we really do need to have a public, open, rational conversation, even about, not only these sort of child dolls, but the whole idea of child porn as well, even depictions of, can that actually be an outlet for somebody
Right.
who may have those
Can
fantasies?
that be used therapeutically?
Right.
For as Dr. Cantor had pointed out, the so-called virtuous pedophiles, the guys that know they're minor attracted, and they know not just to avoid being in an orange jumpsuit, but morally, ethically, legally, they know why it's wrong for them to act out these impulses, and they might need help from someone like us. And if they come to someone like us and we panic and go, "Oh my God, you admitted to being minor attracted, I have to report you as a sex offender," then now we're in, what was that Philip K. Dick story about the thought crimes and the future police? And, the Minority Report.
Minority Report, yeah.
Now we're arresting people for their thoughts, for thinking about an urge or a fantasy. That's where I'll go to the slippery slope argument that the erotophobes love to pull out.
Right, exactly, and that and again, that is that slippery slope, that assumption that if somebody's getting some kind of pleasure, it has to go to excess.
You know what the music means.
Yep.
We always seem to talk ourselves out of time. Imagine the two of us unable to shut up.
Really, go
Thank
figure.
you very much for joining us, and we'll be here next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock for more Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Have a great week, and thanks for watching.
Good night.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.